So that's what I want to talk about today is mental health versus emotional health. We are struggling as a species with mental health. It is a very well accepted epidemic globally. We're thinking more negatively, we're feeling less happy, right? We're more unhappy. We're behaving more destructively than ever before. Not just drugs and alcohol, but bullying and gun violence and racism and all of these problems. And it seems like with all of this destructive behavior on the rise, why is that happening? Are people just losing their minds? Are we just going crazy at a higher rate and this rate is accelerating? There's no gene or hormone for evilness or meanness or narcissism. There's no gene or hormone for beating your wife or beating up on your kids. There's no gene or hormone for gun violence. So what's really going on? Because we try to pin so many of these mental health issues on a gene or a moral failing. And that's what a lot of the modern psychologists, the dawn of modern psychology was back in the 19th century. Some even say the 18th century. And psychology started out of this desire to study the mind and behavior. So why are people acting the way they're acting, behaving the way they're behaving? And what's going on in our mind that's driving all of these behaviors? And like I said a second ago, with the destructive behaviors, I really think that modern psychology, and even you can go back thousands of years to like Socrates and Aristotle and people like that, where we're trying to understand behavior. And I think the idea is that, well, why would anyone do any behavior that's hurting themselves or hurting another person? If they're doing some kind of destructive behavior, they must be out of their mind. They must be crazy, or else they wouldn't do such a horrible behavior. And then the moral question comes into play, and the judgment question comes into play, where someone might say, well, I would never do such a horribly destructive behavior. I wouldn't kill someone. I wouldn't beat my spouse. I wouldn't beat up my kids. I wouldn't drink to excess so I couldn't control my bodily functions or getting myself home from the bar. So I'm a better person than you because I wouldn't do such a horrible behavior. And what I believe happened when modern psychology came to be is it was based on this premise that if you are not in 100% control of your thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors, then your brain must be broken because otherwise you wouldn't do such horrible behaviors. So you must be out of your mind. You must be crazy. And I think that is the real, if you take time and really think about how we interpret behavior and psychology and how we evaluate or judge other people, you'll see that it really comes down to this idea that if you can't control your drinking, then you must have a problem. Your brain must be broken. If you have negative thoughts for too long, then you must be depressed and your brain isn't working properly. But we're missing the deeper root issue as to why. It's not just some genetic problem. In fact, the genetic component is like less than 10% of the problem. It's not a moral failing. It's not a disease like catching malaria or the flu. You don't catch alcoholism. You don't catch substance abuse. You don't catch narcissism. We're operating from this premise that you have to be in 100% control or you have a brain disorder. You have a brain disease. And I think that's where we're missing it. And I've already mentioned a lot of these behaviors. You can see this slide. These are just some of the behaviors, the destructive ones anyway, that are attributed to a mental health problem. Suicide, depression, anxiety, drugs, alcohol, eating disorders, bullying. But there are so many other destructive behaviors that are not considered to be a mental health problem, like greed or the goal for status in this world, or racism. That's not considered a mental health problem, but it's incredibly destructive. So why do some behaviors fall into a destructive, are classified as mental health, but other destructive behaviors are not classified as a mental health problem? And then we're missing the complete opposite side of the coin, which is constructive behaviors. So a constructive behavior, achieving good grades, graduation rates. This is what schools are very concerned about. Culture, engagement, wellness, productivity at a workplace, innovation in the workplace or just in your own life. These are the common kinds of behaviors that we're seeking out in schools and in businesses that are very constructive. But what I've learned over the years is that even constructive behaviors can be detrimental. And I will argue that any behavior is really just a symptom of a deeper problem. And that deeper problem is not a mental problem. It's not a consciously controlled problem. It is an emotional problem. And it's subconsciously controlled, which again, you do not have the conscious control over, which is why the definition that psychologists are operating from, or the premise that psychologists in the mental health industry are operating from, is the reality is we are not in 100% conscious control of our every thought, feeling, action, or behavior. So we know from the neuroscience in the last, only 5, maybe 10 years of neuroscience that our conscious mind is only managing 5% of our actions and behaviors. And 95% of our actions and behaviors are rooted in our subconscious mind. So our conscious mind is really, when you look at the brain and the anatomy of the brain and how that works, it ends up being what's happening in your frontal lobe. This is where your decision making comes from, your reasoning ability, your cognitive processes are happening in your frontal lobe, your cerebral cortex, which is part of the human brain. But meanwhile, your feelings and emotions and intuition are all rooted in your amygdala, which is coming from your midbrain, which is an earlier evolved part of our brain. So our feelings and emotions are coming from our amygdala, and that's where 95% of our actions and behaviors are actually coming from. That's where our subconscious is rooted, in our midbrain, whereas our conscious mind and our decision-making ability, our reasoning ability, is coming from our frontal lobe, which evolved much more recently. So the point of all that is, the reality is as much as we like to think that we're in control of everything that we do, we're really not, because 95% of our actions and behaviors are coming from our subconscious, which is where our feelings and emotions are rooted. And if we think that our 5% brain is going to override our 95% brain the majority of the time, well, that's why we have all of these destructive or extremely constructive behaviors, because they're coming from our feelings and emotions and our subconscious, what is rooted and wired into our subconscious. And just as an example, especially because it's the end of 2023, we're coming around to the new year, and a lot of people are going to be making their New Year's resolutions, right? They want to consciously choose a behavior for the new year. But we know from the data that 80 to 92% of New Year's resolutions fail. If we were really in conscious control of our thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors, then we would not have such a poor success rate on our resolutions. We choose a resolution, it's going to happen, right? I consciously chose it. I'm in conscious control of all my actions and behaviors. It's going to happen. But the reality is it does not happen. And I think the main reason is because we make these decisions in our conscious mind, but it doesn't get transferred to our subconscious mind, where we have a deep-rooted emotion attached to it, or it could be that some deep emotional challenge or belief that's rooted in our subconscious, which is really driving our behaviors. That is why we do not succeed with our resolutions. The point is that I think we're making these New Year's resolutions in our conscious mind. That's where the decision is made. But more often than not, it is not getting transferred to our subconscious mind, which is where our actions and behaviors are truly rooted. And that's why we fail so often with our New Year's resolutions. So what I'd like to offer the audience is a new set of definitions for mental health and emotional health. And I know this is, I would just ask the audience to really take a moment and ponder these definitions, because if you think about it in a different way, then we might really have a chance to improve the overall health and well-being of humanity. The World Health Organization defines mental health where it's a state of well-being, where the individual realizes their own abilities and can cope with normal stresses. It's actually a quite a nebulous kind of definition, in my opinion. And oh, by the way, the World Health Organization does not even have a standalone definition for your emotional health. Emotional health is often considered a part of or a subset of mental health. And when we combine these two, I think we're truly doing a disservice to our overall health and well-being. So the definitions that I want to share and for you to really ponder and think about are these. Mental health. I define mental health as a person's ability to think clearly, to focus, to concentrate, to perform cognitive tasks. This is your frontal lobe, your decision-making ability, your reasoning ability. When you're able to get through school on a day-to-day basis, do your homework, take your tests. You don't have to get straight A's, but just getting through school, doing your homework and all. Or if you're able to do your job on a day-to-day basis, you can attend your meetings, you can do your reports, you can conduct your studies and experiments. That is your mental health. You have the ability to think and concentrate and perform those tests. If you can manage your household, pay your bills, do your groceries, grocery shopping, do your laundry, cut your lawn, that's all your mental health, getting things done. But your emotional health, I define that as your ability to give and receive love, connection, and belonging. It's really your feeling ability. Now, a lot of people will define emotional health as your ability to recognize and manage your emotions. But that's actually the definition of emotional intelligence. When you have the skills to manage your emotions, that's how emotionally intelligent you are. But my question is, why are you having that emotion in the first place? And I believe that is really coming from your state of emotional health. So those are the definitions that I'm working from. And why did I come up with these definitions? Well, I think it really boils down to our basic human needs. Now, I know everybody's individual. We are all unique energies in this universe. Everybody's their own person. We all have our preferences and likes and dislikes and so on. But every human being on the planet has the same basic need. And I've listed them here for you. Maybe there's others, but this is what I've boiled it down to. The 5 physical needs, and these are actually in order of importance: air, shelter, safety, sleep, water, and food. And then there's the 1 emotional need, which is love, connection, and belonging. And I'll just say love, but when I say love, I mean love, connection, and belonging. And we all need these. In fact, every mammal has these same basic needs. And what happens when a basic need is not met? If somebody cuts off your airway, nothing else in your universe matters except getting air. And if your airway's cut off for just a couple of minutes, you're dead. That's how, and that's every human. I don't care if you're black, white, Asian, Korean, South African, Jewish, Christian, gay, straight. It doesn't matter. If you are a human being, if you are a mammal, you need air. That's it. The same thing with shelter. The rule of thumb is you can go 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So shelter is shelter from the environment, but it's also shelter and safety. So if you're going to be chased by a saber-toothed tiger, attacked by a neighboring tribe, that would be your safety. In today's world, there are places in the US definitely where you could get shot randomly. There's neighborhoods that are that dangerous that walking down the street, you could get shot. That is your safety. And when that is in question, you are on high alert for your physical existence. These are just a couple of examples. I listed, all 6 basic needs, but these are the examples just to give an idea of the kind of pain a person experiences when a basic need is not being met. When you go 24 hours without water, you are in a world of hurt. I mean, try going 12 hours without a drink of water, and that's going to be extremely uncomfortable. And I love this little picture that I found of a mom and her baby. The mother is ignoring her baby, and the baby is crying. The baby is reaching out. That baby is in pain trying to get the love and attention from his mother. Because when you don't get that love that you need, it hurts. It causes real pain. And a person will do anything to ease their pain, including suicide, right? If I don't see any way out of having my pain go away, I might choose to die by suicide because I know that will end the pain. So that's where I lead to this slide, is that in any given element of our health, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual health, we're always running on some kind of a spectrum. And the way I think about physical health, the spectrum I see is you're either alive or you're dead. It's really that simple. Now, I'm not saying people who are starving and don't have shelter, I'm not saying that their quality of life isn't very poor, but they're still alive. So if you are alive, then your most basic physical health needs are being met if you are alive. Because if you're dead, something was not met. And when it comes to emotional health, we run the spectrum, and it's either you are receiving the love and you're able to receive it, or you're not receiving the love and connection. And the reason I put loneliness and isolation is because those are the really common terms that we're hearing about in today's society, which is the loneliness and isolation epidemic in society. So when your emotional health needs are not being met, you're going to feel really lonely, isolated, depressed, sad. It feels terrible, and it's real pain. And I actually didn't put a slide on this, but we know from functional MRI studies that the way the brain activates, whether you're experiencing physical pain or emotional pain, your brain activates the same way. We know that. What that means is your brain doesn't know the difference between physical pain and emotional pain. All your brain knows is, I'm in pain, do something about it right now. And in the absence of having every one of your basic needs met, that's when we turn to behavior to try and meet that need or alleviate the pain from not having that need met. You know, I'm not sure how many people have heard this phrase that hurt people will hurt people, including themselves. So if I've been hurt by someone, now I'm talking more emotionally hurt. If I've been hurt by someone, then it's very likely that I'm going to want to hurt them back, right? It's just like if you punch me in the face, well, I'm going to want to punch you in the face. If you tell me I'm a stupid idiot, well, I'm going to tell you you're a stupid idiot. And then the insults just go back and forth because you're tearing me down. You're making me feel bad about who I am, about my value as a human being. And that's something that I've learned over the years, is how valued we feel translates to how loved we feel. And again, love is that basic human need. And the deeper our pain from not having that need for love, connection, and belonging met, the more we're hurt by that emotional pain, the more extreme our behaviors will be to try and ease that pain or compensate in some way for that pain. So that's what I think is really going on with human behavior, is behavior is just the symptom, and the symptom is trying to alleviate your pain. And if you're alive, then it must be an emotional pain it's an emotional pain that's being created, and you're just trying to ease it in some way. And again, I'll just replay this slide from before. It's the same exact slide. We choose all manner of behaviors to ease our pain, to try and ease not feeling loved. Or in terms of constructive behaviors, a lot of times we will seek out a constructive behavior, a lot of times to show our value in the world. If I get better grades, then I'll be more valuable, and value translates to love. If I invent more, right? This is one of my issues, right? I have more than 75 patents. If I invent more, I'll be more valuable and I'll feel more loved. If I do another 10K race, marathon race, triathlon, I'll be valuable. I'll be seen as valuable in society, and then I'll be loved. And that's why I say the more extreme the behavior, the deeper the pain. And this is where endurance sports come into play, and all the competition around sporting events, and especially with the elite events. And I can go on and on about that. But suffice to say, this slide really sums up how emotional health drives behaviors. It's all of our relationships and connections. It's how loved we feel. How much of a sense of belonging do we feel? Do we feel heard and understood by the people who matter to us? Because if we do feel heard and understood, then we feel like we matter. And if we matter, then we must have value. And in our brain, value translates to love. And if that's all being nurtured and our emotional health is being nurtured, then you'll see that in our behaviors, or you'll see that in your behaviors. But if your love and connection and belonging is not being nurtured, then your emotional health will be failing, and you're going to try to compensate with your behaviors, whether constructively or destructively. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but we need to understand that little t trauma adds up over time. So if you are there's ACEs, right? ACEs are ACE. Those are adverse childhood experiences. And those are the big T trauma, like being, hit or punched by your parent when you're a little child, or coming from a family of divorce or sexual abuse. Those are big T traumas. And with a big T trauma, they tend to be very intense events, but they don't usually happen more than once or twice or a handful of times. What we're missing in society is how little t emotional traumas add up over time and cause just as much emotional pain over time as one big T trauma. And where I've landed with the little t traumas is shame, judgment, degradation, and emotional neglect. So if you're crying and your parent says to you as a child, they say, "Oh, don't cry. It's not a big deal. I don't know why you're crying. You shouldn't be so upset about this. It's just not worth it." That's emotional neglect. That's minimizing your emotions, which causes pain. When your emotions are not acknowledged and validated, it hurts. It says, I don't matter. It says, I don't have value. And that translates to not feeling loved. So I know that parents unconditionally love their children, but that is not the message that they are receiving. And when we raise our children with shame and judgment, degradation and neglect, that causes little t trauma. We think we're toughening them up. You got to have a tough skin to live in this world. But if you raise your children in emotionally healthy environments with real love and connection, where feelings are acknowledged and validated and people feel heard and understood, they will be so much more resilient to the challenges in the world, because they'll be more confident and they'll know that they have this foundation of support from other people who matter to them. And that will make them so much stronger and more resilient to these challenges in today's world. So that's really what this slide is all about. I've already said pretty much everything on this slide. Is in order to really nurture emotional health, we need to love and connect and create more of a sense of belonging. And we do this by really listening to each other in a way so that that person feels heard and understood. We need to make sure that we are acknowledging and validating the other person's feelings and emotions as much as possible. You cannot do this too much. And it takes a lot of practice to learn how to acknowledge and validate feelings. I could teach a whole course on that. But when you do it, when you feel heard and understood, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with that person's feelings. It just means that you're acknowledging their feelings. You're validating that their feelings are real to them. And that matters. That's how they know that they matter and that they are valued. And again, feeling valued equals feeling loved. And the more we can stop shaming, judging, degrading, and neglecting each other, the more valued we'll feel, the more loved we'll feel. Give this a try. It's really amazing how quickly a person's behavior changes when you acknowledge or validate their feelings, or when you do not shame or judge them. I mean, one way that this is kind of a common sort of scene that you'll see in a movie or when you hear about gangs is, don't disrespect me, even with parents and kids or teachers and students. Don't you disrespect me, because when you're disrespecting someone, you're devaluing them. That triggers them, and now they're not feeling love. And that hurts. And it reminds them, subconsciously, them of a time when they were young, when they didn't feel valued, when they didn't feel loved, and then everything just unravels from there. That's how important feeling valued is. And when you are valued, when you do feel loved, you're happy, right? And happy people do good things. And we know from the research, and it's not just from the Harvard study that's been going on since 1938, But we know from the Blue Zone book, there are enough sources to know that connection is the key to happiness. Love, connection, and belonging. Because when we feel heard and understood, we know that we matter, which means we feel valued, which means we feel loved. So this is all what gets wired into our subconscious, and that's where our behaviors are coming from. So that's really the message that I want to get, is that all this connection and love, it's not woo-woo, it's real. You know, there's literally a hormone designed to help us love and connect. It's oxytocin. And when you love and connect, this is why you can get, quote, addicted to love, right? You know that song? Because it feels so good. It makes you happy. And when your emotional health is nurtured and you're happy, your behaviors naturally translate to more constructive without being extreme. So that's why I think that our real problem in humanity and society is not our mental health. It's not our conscious thinking ability. It's how we feel. It's how connected we are. So when we can nurture our emotional health and connect, that is when humanity will be truly successful and thrive.